of monetization design is you want your players to spend money in your game and be so stoked by by the whole experience, from the visuals, from the sound, from the actual rewards, that they feel great about it. They're excited. They want to tell their friends and their coworkers and their buddies.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Mastering Retention Roundtable. We're going to be talking a lot about the game economies today. I'm your host, Tom Hammond, one of the founders of UserWise. I have some of my favorite people on today and like the smartest game economists. So I'm just so excited for today's conversations, but maybe we can go around, start with Javier. You know, I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you're currently up to.
Yeah, so I'm Javier Barnes. You can check out my blog, which is not, the name is not easy. It's jv-dev.net, or you can check it, in Gamma Sutra and Medium and everywhere else. I'm a senior product manager at Tilting Point, and I have about 10 years of experience in mobile free-to-play. I've been game economy director at Game of Montreal. I've been game lead at Social Point, and I've been basically working in multiple free-to-play projects and learning a lot about free-to-play economy and game economy.
Yeah, that's great. Hadrian, would you like to go next and maybe let us know how you got into gaming and what game are you currently playing now?
Yeah, so I started pretty young. I actually I studied math and stuff, but you know what? I wanted to make games, so my love for math and an algorithm made me a weird game designer that just didn't really care about narrative and just was caring more about the numbers and the systems. I thought it was the best way to make games. So yeah, initially I'm a game designer specialized in economy, which is sort of, so I worked quite a lot in Paris and startup, did most of the game economy there. And then I was sort of hired by Ubisoft to be a game economy designer. So that's, my job was basically working with numbers all day and just figuring out what's the best meta and the best way to monetize the games. So I did this quite a lot. And then I moved to do GSN games as a sort of LiveOps manager and monetization manager. So that's the other, side of the fence, which is, how do we make money live? So that's thinking about economy, it's also very interesting. So yeah, and then right now I'm just doing new project and having fun. And what game am I playing? I'm a huge WoW fan. So, Kaitlin, we've been talking about this, that has been my addiction since, I actually just played in vanilla. So I had a break in between. So yeah, WoW was great. And then on mobile, I'm a huge RPG fan. So I've been playing actually Summon as well for more than 5 years, which is quite a long time now that I know it. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, we're still waiting for a great article on Gacha from Summoner's War. I remember talking to you about that, and I was like, I need to play that game just to learn about Gacha.
That in my mind, this article is just starting to merge into a what playing 5 years of Summoner's War taught me as a game maker. I think there's actually a lot of stuff that I learned from just playing this game.
That's great. Kaitlin?
Sure. Well, I'm Kaitlin. I'm a lead economic and monetization designer at Rovio. You can see from my sweater. And I got my start in the games industry in Montreal. I was working at Funcom on The Secret World. And I kind of got thrown into the deep end with that one. I showed up on my first day of work asking all sorts of questions about how to get rich in their game and how their trading system works. And the lead designer very quickly realized, holy shoot, she actually has a huge interest in video games and the monetization economic systems and how they interact with how the players actually work with these systems, work with each other. And he just sort of showed me the deep end of the pool, if you use that analogy. And I dove right in and worked on that, worked on several other MMO AAA projects in Montreal. Then I got a job here in Finland working in mobile. And I've been in mobile now for almost 6 years this summer. And yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some game economy stuff. So
Sure.
for folks that are like, what's a game economy? I know what a game is. Maybe let's just like do a definition of that. Who would like to define what a game economy is?
Sure, I can go on that one. So when looking at game economies, really what we're considering is any way in which the player makes a transaction. So converts one thing that they have for one thing that they want. So that can be as obvious as, hey, I've got real world money and I want speed ups, or I want this really awesome skin. But it can also be more complicated things like, I want to get this, event exclusive item. What content do I need to do in order to earn it? So understanding how the player's desires for rewards can be used to drive them into different content and basically spread the players to different areas of the game that they might not experience otherwise.
So to make sure that I'm wrapping my head around what a game economy is, let's take a mid-core RPG game as an example. And so, I've seen a lot of these games where you kind of collect a bunch of heroes and you go and you do campaigns. Campaigns have certain drops, and those drops can be used towards upgrading your heroes from, regular to green to blue to purple, whatever, 5 stars. And, you might have like raid tickets so you can go and like do those levels really fast, and you have some sort of stamina mechanic. So, if I'm thinking about my economy, what all of those different pieces would you guys factor into the economy? Would it be like the diamonds that I use to buy more stamina? Would it be the stamina itself? Like, what are the different aspects that I should consider as economy if I'm trying to, design it?
I have a try at this. For me, this is not only the currencies, but also the system that supports the transaction between those economies. So that what I would call game economy. It's like, it's not only the diamonds and stuff, but it's also how do you handle those diamonds, and also what's the scarcity, what's the strategy behind. So it's not only the currency themselves, the transaction, the systems that support the transaction, and the overall strategy that just rules over all those systems and why they are there. So this is what I would just describe as this game economy in this context.
Yeah, because sometimes the economies are all about scarcity. Like, what do I have and what do I want to have?
Yeah.
And that scarcity can be a currency, but it can also be something like time. I mean, if I'm investing a lot of time into upgrading this particular character, or if I'm working with my guild, I might spend a great amount of time just hanging out with friends, and that is also a scarcity. I mean, we only have so much time on this rock, so what do we want the players to be spending their time doing, and using the economy to sort of nudge them into different paths. So yeah, I mean, it's not always just a currency. It can be even just like time as a currency.
So it sounds, go on, Javier.
No, on this topic, I think that whenever I think on how would explain what game economy is to somebody, it would be probably to compare it pointing out what are the main differences against actual economy. Essentially, economy, it's a system where it's a very complex definition, and there are thousands of them. But essentially, we could say that real economy, it's study of the production and the distribution of different resources. It deals with the scarcity. I think that the main difference between that and games, which actually explains a lot of what are the objectives, some of which you were mentioning, is the fact that in games, the objective is not only a proper distribution of the resources, or even a proper or an optimal production and distribution of the resources, because especially the production, for example, that essentially the developer can just put a couple more zeros and make it, but rather it's the thing with game economy is that it affects the behavior of the player inside the game, and contrary to real economy, where you are kind of limited on your ability to design the economy, because the economy is already designed, and basically governments or wherever economy regulators to have a specific things that they can touch in order to alter the economy. But on games, you can tweak the entire economy, and you can actually tweak the world rules in ways that will affect the economy, which that is not possible on the real economy, of course. And essentially, I would say that the game economy, it's the entire management of value of the game, and that includes scarcity, desire for players to obtain things, time required to obtain things, because time is kind of currency as well when we're talking
it is
about game economy. And I think the key objective is that it's all about generating a player behavior and modifying the player behavior, and essentially creating a player behavior that it's fun and that also you can monetize. If we're talking free to play.
I would add on that something that's, just when you said, made me realize something, that the game economy is inherently linked to game progression, because it also, allows you to know how fast you can go. Because, the difference between the current normal economy and the game economy is that everyone is on a journey that starts at different moments. And, we are supposed to control this journey. And also this goes through controlling what the economy is going to look like for some specific players. I think that's also a superpower that we have as game makers. We're just shaping the journey.
I think another important thing to mention, that the difference between real world economy and game economy is game economies have to be fun. Like it has to be pleasant to interact with, because it's so easy for a player to just be, I don't want to play this game no more, and go to a different title. So you can't really do that in the real world. You can't say, this economy isn't working for me, I'm going to go do, exactly. Like you can't really opt out of the real world economic impacts, but you absolutely can with a video game. I mean, if I'm playing a game and the economy isn't balanced, if it's not, if I'm looking at this game and I'm seeing, okay, well, these players who do this content are rewarded, substantially better than the players who do this other content, and I don't want to do that first one, it's not fun for me. And if it's not fun, I'm just going to go play something else, because, again, like as we said, time is precious, and I'm not going to waste my time spending it playing a game that I don't enjoy. So part of the real challenge as an economy game designer is really getting into the player's head and understanding the behavioral economics of why interacting with this particular system is enjoyable for the player. And like the holy grail of monetization design is you want your players to spend money in your game and be so stoked by by the whole experience, from the visuals, from the sound, from the actual rewards, that they feel great about it. They're excited. They want to tell their friends and their coworkers and their buddies, like, hey, dude, I just spent $10 in such and such a game, and I got this cool thing. You got to try it. That is the holy grail of economic and monetization game design, is to get that excitement, that that honest joy into the player's psyche every time they interact with either your monetization system or your base economy or anything like that. You want them to have that moment. And that's really the challenge that comes out of it. Because I mean, when Tom and I spoke earlier, I mentioned that like making a Skinner box that's exploitive, anybody can do that. That's not that science has been known for decades now. Like it's not hard to make a super exploitive, non-respecting monetization system. And yeah, you can make money doing that, but at the end of the day, players are gonna remember they're gonna remember that experience. And if your studio, has their name front and center on that title, they're gonna remember you next time. And they might not be quite so keen to download another one of your titles if they remember, oh yeah, the last one they didn't treat me all that well. But on the flip side, if you give them that awesome experience, if you respect the player's time, yeah, you might make a little bit less money in the next quarter. But 10 quarters from now, when you're releasing, 2 or 3 more products, 2 or 3 more titles, and the players, they remember, oh yeah, that studio, they were awesome. They gave me, they respected me as a person, as a player. They're far more likely to click that download button the next time they see your studio logo pop up. And over the long run, you'll make way more money by being, more respectful and more honest with your players about what they're getting for their buck. But that's a lot harder as a game designer. You've got to put a lot more effort and a lot more time into, designing these systems, testing these systems, iterating on these systems. So it's always a challenge of, how much profit do you need right now to pay the bills, but also how much can you invest in future development by having these awesome systems that take longer to put in but pay out more in the long term.
So what is it about an economy that actually makes it fun? I was kind of
that's quite the question.
and maybe I'll isolate this down. Have any of you guys played Valhelm? It's been blowing up on Steam.
No,
lately.
I haven't. I've been meaning to get it because it's been everywhere. Like all of my friends have been posting about how awesome this game is, and I'm like, oh, I've got to try it.
Okay, so I started a server with some friends, and I haven't been able to play it as much as them. But every time I log in, they've done all this crazy stuff. But the game terrifies me. I feel like I go out and I try to do things and I just get slaughtered, or I stumble into a new biome and something just comes over and kills me in one hit. It's a terrifying place. But you've got to go out and you've got to find things and you've got to find new things. So, first you got to figure out where's the copper? Okay, where does that exist? I have to go explore looking for it while I'm terrified that something's going to kill me. Then maybe you get a little bit stronger and you're feeling pretty good. Then you've got to go find iron. And it's a very new thing. And there's much fewer other monsters that'll just also kill you. So you're just out there looking for stuff. And, I was thinking about that, in terms of the economy, it's the economy is really okay, where are all the different iron deposits and copper deposits and things like that are in the game? And yeah, they don't have any in-app purchases in there, but if they did, after I, slogged out looking for iron for a couple hours and I managed to come back and get a couple bars, if you hit me with a offer to buy 50 iron for a couple bucks, yeah, maybe I would do that so I could get my armor and feel stronger about it. But it's interesting to think about it. But, what about all that experience actually makes it fun? Because I am looking for iron. I am interacting with the game economy, right? So, what about that action is fun, and how can I take that and apply that to other games?
So if I can give my 2 cents on that, I think that actually one of the key things when it comes to designing a game economy is that, contrary to real economy, in real economy you try to have the economy systems as optimal and non-friction, and they tend to equilibrium. in games, what you need to do is to introduce frictions and to introduce the system has to be unbalanced in a way that allows you to or forces you or incentivizes you to interact with the game mechanics that are going to make the game fun. So imagine in Valheim, the resource acquisition was designed in a way that you didn't have to interact with the world, you didn't have to explore, and so on. Though that economy would be driving you away from the points of the game that are going to create these kind of wow moments where you are having fun and you're creating memorable experiences. I think that the key to good game economies are those that incentivize the players to specific behaviors that make the player interact with mechanics and with behaviors that are going to create the psychological effect of fun. Now, what specific mechanics generate fun? Honestly, I don't know. My technique has always been my technique has always been to study player behavior and to interact with the audience in order to detect which are the points that generate fun, and then I try to modify the game economy or to design the game economy in a way that makes the player go over and over through that situations and makes those situations that were perceived as fun or that created an emotional reaction from the player happen more often. So, for example, if one of the most fun things in the game is to create like this very specific build that is going to make that you win once every 10 times, but that time you win, you feel awesome and it kind of pays off for the 9 defeats that you got. Probably I'm going to build I'm going to try to make that in the game economy. It makes sense to go to acquire these, items or equipment or whatever that is going to generate this situation, or at least I'm going to make worth that if you play with a style that gives you only 1 victory out of 10 matches, because that victory was so fun, it's going to be as rewarding as having a 50% ratio with another equipment or another style of play that is not as fun, for example.
Yeah, I think part of it is really understanding what the target market is for your title. I've worked in some various studios in the past where they've said, "Oh, we'll find our target market once the game is in soft launch or once the game is in launch," and that rarely works well. You've got to know what your target market is, what it is that draws them to your game, in order to know how to incentivize them with rewards in the gameplay. Like if you look at Valheim or Minecraft as a more as an older example, like they are very, very heavily in the exploration. Like, yeah, there's combat elements. You've got your creepers, you've got your ghasts, you've got your zombie pigmen and all those things that you've got to kill off in Minecraft. But at the end of the day, it's an exploration game, and their economic loop rewards you for exploring. I mean, you go into the underground, and that's where you find the best loot. That's where you find the diamonds, and then that's where you find the underground fortresses, which allows you go to the to the nether, to the end, and that's where their economic loop lies, is in exploration. There is some rewards for combat, but that's not where it really shines. And knowing what your game is targeting, like, are you targeting exploration players? Are you targeting combat players? Are you targeting collection players? And putting your rewards in those fields is really what will help give your game that fun loop. Like you're mentioning in Valheim, like going off and exploring, looking for that iron is what gave you those fun moments. And there was, little sprinkles of combat around that, like when the troll comes out and, smacks you into the side of the head. But what drove you out there was the exploration. And that's what gave you that whole experience around it. So yeah, they know what their game is. It's an exploration game. And when you're designing your game, this goes like right into the pre-prototyping stage. Like when you're initially coming up with like, oh yeah, let's make this type of game. That's when you should be deciding how your economic loop is going to reward players. Like if we're looking at an exploration game, okay, we want players to go out and find things. So that's how we want to reward players. If it's a combat game, okay, we want there to be a lot of different types of combat so we can reward players for fighting different things. And yeah, so that's a very important thing, is understanding what your market is and why players are drawn to your game in the first place. Because one thing that one of my leads told me, which really stuck with me over the years, is that players will, if given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of any game. You have to make sure that the most optimal route is, points the players to at least one of the more fun ways to play your game. You don't want players to be rewarded for playing your game badly. You don't want them to be rewarded for playing your game in a boring manner, in an unfun way. You always want them to be the best rewards to come from the most fun parts of your game.
That's great.
I like that. Yeah, that's cool. Just my 2 cents on this. I think it comes back to my favorite free-to-play word, which is progression. I think what you all guys said is just all of those games, what they had in common is like, what was your journey through Valheim? What were you trying to achieve, and how the game economy was basically making you, achieve those goals. So in this case, there was a progression of armor, of power. You could very well put a number on this and say you need to reach 500, even if this number is not displayed. This is your goal. Your goal was to get stronger, and the game economy was supporting this by giving you rewards, currency. In Valheim, you don't really have. A little bit, but it's more about gathering resources to be able, and the resources are the economy, because how scarce they are, how hard it is to get them. It's game economy, and this is what made it fun, because you had a journey and you had a clear goal, which was, I know the legend said that you can harpoon some sort of boss using the boat and stuff. I haven't reached this part yet. That's a goal. My goal is clear. I want to do this. So how do I reach this? Then the whole system is funneling you through this journey, and this is what makes game economy great, because you have clear goal, clear understanding of how you want to lead your players and how hard and time consuming it's going to be. So that's what makes a great game economy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I get how that all works together, but what if I'm in the pre-production phase and I want to be able to simulate or plan out what this actually looks like, so that I can kind of achieve what I feel like is the right balance. Obviously you can always balance it later, but like, can you simulate a game economy in pre-production so that you can have your best foot forward, when you start?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're limited based on what your assumptions are. And I mean, you can assume what players will behave, like how much, how far will they walk from their base? How many NPCs will they attack during a 24-hour period? How much sleep will the actual physical player get during a day? How long is the player session going to be? And yeah, you can absolutely simulate the player economics by using these assumptions and using the drop rates, the spawn rates, the average distance to X for an exploration game, and simulate how the player will progress through the systems, how they will earn rewards, how they will spend rewards. But of course, during these early phases, the biggest variance is your experience as a designer. how good can you make these assumptions? How close can you make them to reality? And that's where experience as a economic designer really comes in, because you can, you're basically making your best guesses, and that's where the years of experience comes in. Now, once you're actually in soft launch or launch, you can start harvesting real player data and refining your assumptions, refining your simulations to get a more accurate picture of what player behavior will be within your game. Like, for example, within a title I'm working on, we assumed players would do X content 5 times per day. Turns out they were doing it closer to 20 times per day. Okay, so we had to change how the rewards work because players were doing it way more than we thought they were going to. So we originally made it very rewarding in order to try and entice them to get them to do it more often. We were too good at that, and players just started doing it all the time. So we had to scale down the rewards a little bit in order to make them more balanced over the 24-hour period so that it didn't outweigh other reward cycles. So it's important to have that assumptions going forward at the very beginning, but once you start getting real data, you need to start refining those assumptions and updating your models and seeing whether your models are still giving you the results you want. And if not, you need to change how your economy is balanced. I always say that players can never play a game wrong, but designers can design the game wrong. So you have to accept that players are going to play the game the way they want to play the game, and you can only nudge them very gently. So you have to build your game around the way that they play.
I don't fully agree with the nudge gently. I know that
well,
my experience is building free-to-play is actually crafting a controlled experience, even if people are going to diverge from this. A lot of this comes to just controlling the way they're going to interact with the game. I think that free-to-play are a great example of this. Just to jump back on the subject, because that's what I've been doing the most, I think. So I'm like you, Kaitlin. I like to do simulations and stuff in pre-prod. So what I do is basically building the algorithm to just play the game over and over again.
Yeah.
And just act like, so when I say play, it's basically building some sort of an AI, simple one, that makes decision on your economy, and then you build player profiles. You can say, so something I've been using is the explorer, killer, or whatever model, psychological model, and based off this, a killer might react differently when it comes to making a choice. So the bots will interact with the algorithm differently. So this is what I've been used to making. You have all of those player profiles that can be, that's a guy. It doesn't have to be a guy. That's a player that plays a game twice a day, 15 minutes. That is more a collector than anything else. He has $10 per month to spend and can watch 50 ads. And based on this, the full game economy is going to be modeled, and then you get the output. And the output is like, it takes 43 days and 33 minutes to reach the level 53 and he opened the 536 gachas and have 3 legendaries got. And that's what so I think you can definitely do this. In terms of tools, I think you can do it with Google Sheets, Excel very well. I think those tools tends to be pretty limited. So I've been coding everything into Python algorithm for a while. So you just code the algorithm yourself, just define, basically just coding the game without the gameplay. So this is how I've been describing it. You will be able to assume a lot of this stuff. So that's why I do guesses. I do guess a little bit, but it comes at the end to just being able to model so many profiles that you say there's extreme cases because someone that might do this and this and this will be able to just progress so fast, and we don't want that. How can we limit this? And someone that doesn't play enough, so maybe we say the normal guy that just play in the subway is never gonna reach the final boss because it's way too hard to get this currency. So we need some sort of more source for those guys that can have more gold per minute. So the source is way better, way optimized for those guys because they need the money. If not, they are gonna churn. It's gonna take too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And
this is
having
what I've been
those,
building.
yeah, having those simulations and those assumptions are vital in early design. But it's also important to revisit those assumptions as you develop the game, because
True.
sometimes like the game you think you're making on day one is just not the game that you're making,
That's
a
true.
week, a month, 6 months from now. 6 months from now, you look at your initial assumptions and you're just like, what game was this for?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, yeah, I tend to be pretty accurate. But
Yeah, I mean,
it's,
but I mean that's
it's
where
hard.
the experience comes in. I mean, that's where hiring someone with years of experience as an economics or monetization designer can save your company so much effort and
does.
just lost production going forward. I mean, sometimes you bring someone in, they look at one of your designs and they're just like, oh, I don't know about this one. And you can save a game sometimes by just cutting out one bad feature or putting in one extra feature. And yeah, having someone with that expertise who can look at your project and just say, okay, it's missing X, Y, and Z, and it's got too much A, B, and C. Let's redistribute some of our effort, some of our manpower into things that can really turn this game from an to a genre defining hit on the store.
Yeah, I think that if somebody is starting out to plan a game economy, honestly, I think that what I always do, like these three things, which are related to stuff that you folks mentioned. The first is agent assumption. So I create some personas and try to identify, but that should be done for every area of design. But in game economy, it's also super important. What are the kind of mechanics that they are going to enjoy, etc. That's going to give you clues on how to, design the different economic to push towards different behaviors and so on. And I completely agree with the fact that assumptions are not very good, or at least my own approach is, okay, you need assumptions to start, but you want to move away from those assumptions as soon as possible and try to replace that fast with real data just to de-risk your assumptions. Of course, having somebody experienced is going to make that the data assumptions are right most of the time, but I think that in our industry, no degree of experience guarantees a 100% success ratio on predictions or assumptions. So even if the predictions will require less movement in order to reach reality, I think that the best approach is to try to gather player feedback and gather player data as soon as possible in order to polish the model and to properly understand how it's going to actually be the actual behavior of the player in the game. The second is economy foundations, and that has to do with how do I build my prediction model, or what I call it control model. I'm not sure if it's a standard word, but I always call it the simulation. I always call it a control model. There are several tools to do that. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't been mentioned. I actually wanted to ask you, maybe you can answer later on this, if you have tried out machinations.
Oh yeah,
I've checked it out.
They
I think
they changed their website. I knew it when it was an open source project from the university when I was a student, and now they built a company around it. So shout out to Machinations. The guys are great.
So one thing,
they've monetized it.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
So one thing is, I think that building this simulation is really something that should be mandatory, because you need to predict time that is going to, without a simulation, you basically are not going to be able to predict what is going to be the player behavior, and you're not going to be able to know stuff like how how much money do I have to give? How much time does it take to reach this point and this point? What I do usually is that I start economy with what I call the economy foundations. Usually it's setting up on stone some agreements on how much time translates into how much, or creating some high-level equivalences between time, currency, damage, DPS, and so on, like kind of those foundation agreements, and then that makes building the model much easier. I think I've also seen that it makes my models do not fall into excessive complexity, because if I set these strong foundations at the beginning for the economy, then I don't have 3 different sources of currency which work with different, completely different ratios and stuff like that. I don't have, or at least I do have under control the different ratio of acquisitions of the different features of the game and so on. So I would recommend also build these kind of economy foundations, this kind of high-level equivalence between time, different currencies, and so on. And that makes creating assumptions for how much time are going to players play and so on much easier, and it makes easier to make the model. Now about the model, and I wanted to answer to Hadrian on this point, is I've tried AI, I've tried AI modeling for the games. I've tried machinations. I've tried a lot of things. Honestly, what I use is Excel after at the end of the just because or that has been my experience. Maybe I don't code as fast as you, but my experience with both machinations or coding an AI or building internal tools and so on is that especially during the production of the game, I may be introducing changes so fast that the time between I decide or I'm toying in my head with one idea and being able to integrate it on the simulation, I want that time to be as short as possible. And then what I've seen is that on Excel, I'm able to put some quick numbers together really fast. And what I appreciate on the, let's say, pre-production or early production, or early production of a feature is the ability to keep it on a wibbly-wobbly economy state where I can mutate it really fast. So I think that and this is actually my main problem, the main problem that I have with machinations is the fact that once you have everything set up, it's super understandable, it's easy to explain to people that may not be experts on or may not be aware of all the intricacies and everything. But I feel it's not as fast. Maybe I'm not good at it enough, but I feel it's not as fast to test new things and to just put some numbers together. That's why I use Excel, because it allows me to test ideas and put some random numbers and check stuff like really quick. And I value speed. I think that sometimes in game economy, or essentially in creative ideation, I feel that sometimes having it perfect is not as valuable as being able to have it fast, because that will allow you to code bad ideas really fast, and you really don't need the extreme accuracy in order to know that something is a bad idea. Like you can probably predict that faster. So basically, if somebody is starting out thinking on an economy or something like that, and I had to recommend it how to start, I would suggest with these 3 things, like agent assumptions, like create personas, economic agents, set up some economy foundations, and then build a control model based on those foundations. And then, of course, like Kaitlin said, alter that based on the behavior you actually see on your player. So if somebody is doing 20 times what you expected 5, you need to retweak the model. And also another thing that I feel it's also important is gather the mood of the player. So if players are doing something, the exact number that you wanted them to do, but they are not enjoying it, or they are not fully understanding, or they're hating it every single step of the way, probably that's, you need to tweak it, even if the assumption is right. Another point that I also feel very useful is, and I think it's really related to knowing your audience, is sometimes you can think a better economy feature, or a feature that would make the economy make more sense, but you need to take in account that the audience is going to also expect a certain economy to behave in a certain way. So, for example, I'm a huge fan of set rotations, and I love this thing of, okay, I cannot play with my units anymore, and now I have this to collect these other new units. But you also need to take in account if that makes sense to the assumptions that the players have in their heads on how the economy works. And even if it makes sense on the paper, maybe players hate that at the end of the season they lose all their progression or all their inventory. And that kind of thing, those kind of things have to be taken in account as well.
Yeah.
Okay, go on, Kaitlin, go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like tools like machinations are extremely useful when you've got an economy with high degrees of player choices. So, for example, I have multiple types of heroes that I could be upgrading at the same time. Machinations can allow you to actually like click through. It's like, okay, what happens if the player upgrades this hero, upgrades more of these heroes than these heroes? It's also a fantastic tool for demonstrating an economic flow to like executives, outside sources, people who are not, design focused. This can work well for showing it to artists, showing it to QA, just in general, showing it to people who are not super Excel junkies like the rest of like the designers tend to be. But yeah, I definitely agree with Javier. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. That the if I'm actually in the guts of making a economy, 99% of the time I'm using Excel, just because it's so quick and easy to change a number, change a scaling rate, and seeing how it, if I've got a graph up there, it can show me exactly how things are changing in real time. And if I've got the sheet hot linked to the config to another sim, I can pull in data using named ranges, and I can just change one number and it will be updated across multiple places, and I can see how that will affect different aspects of the game. Like if I change, if I want players to recruit this troop, and I increase the price by 5%, how does that change their ability to be able to upgrade their buildings? How does that change their their PvP rewards? So all these sorts of things can have these cascading effects, which can be a little bit easier to see in an Excel sheet where you've got things linked properly between the various tables. So yeah, I mean, if I'm going to be presenting something to the board, yeah, machinations, perfect tool. But if I'm neck deep in the actual economy and I'm still in the process of making it instead of modeling it after it's been made, then yeah, for that I much prefer working in Excel.
I do tend to. So I've been working with Excel quite a lot. I even made a custom plugin that just auto create columns and stuff based on my needs. So
nice.
Yeah, I know the good old days. No, the thing with machination is great. Their framework is actually very clever. The way they handle currencies and sources and pools and the way all of this definition of stuff. I actually stole most of this to create my own framework because this is great. This is just baseline good. So I use this. Excel tends to be a bit limited when it comes to multiple loops of iteration of things.
Yes.
You cannot just you cannot ask Excel to do 10,000 iteration of this economy because there's a couple of randoms and drops and rates and stuff.
If they ever add how to do a for loop, in Excel.
I know. This is what I was discussing
so
this with a
stoked.
designer
They
friend.
don't have a plugin for that. It seems
Me
like
too.
It's because Excel is not thought this way. Excel is thought in a column and line.
It's an
framework.
accountant's tool. Like
Yeah.
Excel is really designed for accountants, but
Does-
game designers
doesn't know
have
how
kind
to
of usurped it for this other
Kill it.
task. And yeah, like having for loops that could run in Excel
I
would just
know.
be
It would be too powerful, and Excel is just also not great at working with a list of stuff, and like list of creatures of and it's just it doesn't do loops basically.
Yeah.
Excel
Yeah.
doesn't do loops. That's why. But yeah, that's a great tool for approximation, and it's not. I don't think modeling and coding your algorithm should be a standalone thing. It should be plus your actual model in Excel for the values and changing them for the the normal balancing. So yeah, totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that another thing that maybe we haven't mentioned, and it's really important, is that even if things make sense on the simulation and make sense on the Excel, you need to play it.
Play the game.
Because I've seen so many times on my career, like stuff that really makes sense on the paper and and then you play it and it's terrible, and like even if it's something that is achievable in 3 or 4 days of playing, you feel like it's going to take you like 100 years and stuff like that. So probably I haven't found any replacement to at some step or probably at every single step manually play testing and making sure that the actual behavior that the player is going through makes sense.
And it's also extremely vital to get non-economists to play your game, because we're too close to it. We know how things work, so we know how we expect the players to react to things. If we expect the players to be like, oh wow, I got a diamond out of the ground, but we call it common quartz, then the player might not actually find it as awesome as we intend it to be. So getting non-economists in to play the game who don't necessarily know the value of things can really help you understand how a real player will emotionally react to your economy. Because as you said, just because the economy is balanced on a spreadsheet doesn't mean that the player thinks it's balanced in their head.
So another thought on getting something that works on a spreadsheet and what we expect it's going to take 43 days to complete this. I feel like in the real world, at least for your high-end, really engaged users, you might think it's going to take 2 weeks for them to get through something, and then they're done in like a day or two. How do you guys account for that sort of thing when you're trying to design your economy? Like, do you just know that, okay, even though I think this is going to take them 6 months, they're probably going to be done in like a week? Or, do you try to factor that into your game economy design at some level?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to account for how long it's going to take players to consume the content. And, I know players tend to hate time gating, where there's some artificial limit on how fast they can progress through a given piece of content. Either it's, hey, you have to craft this potion of fire resistance in order to be able to go further up the volcano, and it takes 48 hours to craft it. Players tend to hate those things, but as designers, it's a good safety net that we can use to ensure that players don't burn themselves out on content. Going back to that thing I said earlier about how players will optimize the fun out of any game that they play, that can also apply to just doing content so much and so repetitively that it loses its entertainment value. So sometimes as a designer, we have to slow the player down in order to actually make the game more fun in the long term for them. And yeah, if you don't have any hard controls over how fast the player can consume a content, you basically just have to assume that however long it physically takes for them to complete the content, that's how long it's going to take. So if it's 24 hours to physically click the buttons to do the content, someone will finish that content in 24 hours, probably 23.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
So,
but even if you intend it to last for 6 months, someone's going to finish it in 23 hours. So yeah, it's important to understand how fast the player will be physically able to consume the content, and whether or not that is a pleasant experience, whether or not that's what you want the players to do. Because yeah, I mean, if that's the optimal way to finish the content, that's how players are going to do it.
Would
Yeah,
just
usually-
add on
sorry.
that maybe, Javier, like don't be afraid of thinking like a whale. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid of someone that can and that will maybe spend tens of thousands of dollars on an
Oh, yeah,
event. Or
absolutely.
it's like, just never underestimate the power that payers will have. I know those are free to play games. They are gonna be whales, and most engaged people are also payers. So don't be afraid when you model these things to say, what if? What if someone just breaks all the gates? What if someone has unlimited diamonds or just unlimited resources? It's just because the time is limited, the physical action is limited, but some people will break those walls, and you have to take this in account all the time. And the best way to do it is, in my opinion, is just to model those, like, what does it mean to spend $100 on this event? Like, what can you do with what's 100 worth of currency?
Yeah.
And is it a good experience? Is it meaningful to spend $100 on this pack for this event, for this gacha, for this whatever you're designing for? And this, you should never forget about this, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things I was saying earlier about how, you want to make sure that the player has a awesome experience with spending money in your game. And yeah, like what you're saying, Hadrian, really hit that nail right on the head. Like, you want to model out, like, okay, if I spend $10, what's my experience? Is it fun? If I spend $100, what's my experience? Is it still fun? If I spend $100,000, what's my experience? And very importantly, is it still fun? Because yeah, I mean, of so many free-to-play games, I look at them and I'm like, yeah, but if I had unlimited money, if I was a rich oil tycoon and money was no object to me, I could completely spend myself out of your game.
Yeah.
I could just drop in a whole bunch of money, be done the game, and be done the game. Like, there's nothing for me to do. So making sure that there's even if you do drop infinite money into the game, that all that does is gets you more fun. That's ideally, like, anytime you spend money, it needs to be a fun multiplier. It can't just be skipping the tedium, because otherwise it's just like, yeah, okay, at the end of the day, it's tedious. You want the money to be a fun multiplier.
That's why cheaters never last long in the games,
Oh,
because
no.
it's boring. It's boring to cheat.
You turn on IDKFA and it's no longer fun. There's no challenge to it anymore. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, usually what I do is that in the control models, whenever I set up the different players, or the control model has, like, player that is very engaged, players that is not very engaged, I would recommend that folks create a player that has has infinite time, and player that has infinite time and has infinite resources. I also think it's timers, linking a little bit with what Kaitlin said. It's a bit tricky, because I've seen, for example, in especially when releasing new features for a live audience. So for example, on on Monster Legends, we had this thing like this superb unit, and in order to get it and to get it maxed out, you needed resources that you could only get on events that appeared once every week. So actually, we know that if you collect the entire set of resources of that event, and even if you want to pay, it's going to take you like 3 months. Because you collect the event and the event is not going to appear again. And one of the earlier designs that we tested out was instead of having the event appear over and over again, make that once you complete the event closes and you get a timer of 1 week, and then it would open again. We were thinking, okay, and then we can monetize and make, with players, there's 1 or 2 days left and want to accelerate. But what was happening is that players were hating it and they didn't want it, because instead of they thinking, okay, if I wait, I can have it on 3 months, or thinking, okay, if I pay a little bit, I can get it. I can cut 3 weeks out of the 7 weeks, out of the 7 days. What they were thinking is, okay, I want it now, and because I want it now, I need to pay this infinite or this super insane amount of money, and I hate it. This you're super greedy and so on. So I think it's very important to take in account player feedback and to understand that even for players that have infinite resources, spending those resources should feel right, should feel that you're getting something awesome. On that specific experience, one thing we learned is that players were super happy on paying for not missing out the chance to maximize the acquisition on every specific event appearance. But they were not, they hated having to pay in order to skip the time between one event and the other, and those kind of things are I think are super important, to understand what people hates when they spend and what do they enjoy, in order to make sure that the monetization options on your game actually make people feel right, and you cannot pay away the fun of the game.
How do you figure out those things? I think this is the second time you mentioned, like gathering players' viewpoints. Is it just surveys? Is it listening to community? Like, what is the best way for me to do that and actually know from like a data perspective that I'm like talking to the right people that have done the right thing and I'm getting like the right answers that I can actually have insights on, right?
You really need multiple ways of collecting the feedback. I mean, surveys are great at getting players' opinions of what they think they know. So if a player will what they think is fun. The reason why I specify that is because sometimes players will think that they are doing certain activities more often than they are, or will think they're doing activities far less than they actually are. So it's important to contrast the surveys, which is their perceptions, with in-game activities, which is more of a hard data. So like, how many times are they clicking on this button? How many seconds do they spend looking at this dialogue? How many times do they check the reward panel to see what their progress is? But of course, those hard numbers don't have any emotion behind it. So that's where the surveys come in. And so you have to use them in conjunction. You've got the surveys, which give you the emotion, and the hard data from your analytics, which gives you the hard numbers. And yeah, sometimes surveys are great. Sometimes even just like, hey, if you've got a big spender in your soft launch, reach out to them. If you've got Discord
just
and it's like, hey, yeah, well, I mean, if you've got them on Discord, like, hey, we know this person has the same the same call sign as their in-game thing, and we know, hey, this player has spent, $3,000 in our soft launch. Send them a message, for goodness sake, contact
It's
this player. Yeah. And just ask them like, hey, what do you like? What don't you like? What have you spent on? Well, I mean, you know what you spent on because you got the analytics, but I mean, getting their opinion of like, what was the best thing that you bought? What's the thing that you value the most? What's your prized possession in our game? I mean, that's so cool, getting that kind of data from a player. Like, what is the thing that you own in our game that you are most proud of, that you want to show off to the world? Because that can really change like what you find out. Like, okay, this is what the players are really after. Like, oh, they don't really care about, you know, this skin, but they're super impressed with this, you know, this title. Okay, why are they so impressed with this title? Was it like super exclusive to get? Was it super hard? Or is it just because it sounds cool? Because I mean, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I want the Immortal as a title, just because it sounds cool. Might not be hard to get. So yeah, like getting that feedback from your players is so incredibly valuable, especially the spending players. Now, there are, of course, depending on where you are, certain legality issues with reaching out to players based on, you know, data that you've acquired from within the game. You know, sometimes it has to be anonymous. So talk with legal department before doing anything like this. But yeah, I mean, if you can, if you're allowed to talk to your players, sometimes even if you can. You know, like one of our developers that I worked with a while ago, he was friends with some people who were in a whale guild in a different game. It wasn't one of ours, but these were people who would drop, you know, a couple $1,000 a month into this title, and we actually contacted these whales, and we paid to have them come in. We did a big survey. We talked to them. We sat down with all the designers, chatted with them for an entire afternoon. They weren't even whales in our game. They were whales in a different game. But just getting the insights of like, why do they spend $1,000? Why do they change games? Why do they go, okay, this game is no longer worth our time, worth our money. Let's all, because they leave en masse. Like all of them would go to different games as a group of friends. So knowing how to attract that group of friends can allow you to bring in many whales at one time, and also retain them. Like, you don't want these people to get annoyed with your game and leave for somebody else's, because when one goes, they all go. So yeah, if you can reach out to players with these kinds of profiles, absolutely, it's an invaluable information as a game designer.
It's VIP management, however it's called, it goes way beyond just having priority queuing on tickets when you send a mail. It's not that. It has nothing to do with that. Had a good friend who was a VIP manager, and this guy was on Discord all day giving us amazing information about the biggest and the more engaged guys, because he was talking to them directly, just asking the good questions. And something I think, I fully agree on you. I found a lot of whales in my career. I think it's always very valuable information. But something I think we can also consider is talking with influencers, talking with the guys who have a community already that can give you valuable feedback and honest, because the guys, when they receive comments on their YouTube channel or on Twitch or whatever, the players are like spending time, writing those and just explaining how they feel. So I think influencers are actually, very valuable as players first. Most of the time as payer also, because they do tend, because that's their job. So they tend to drop some money in the game. So ask those guys. It just costs nothing. And most of the time they're very cool, very honest, and just give you the honest feedback that you need.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like the influencers as well, they know what, like they have access to data, which we don't.
Yeah.
Like they know, like, okay, when I make a video about, like this weapon, how to make an awesome build for this weapon, I get 100,000 views. When I make a build for this other weapon, I get 3 million views. Okay, well, as a developer, you want to know what weapons are your players going back to and viewing builds for. You want to know what players are, going back, a couple of months ago to look up videos on.
Yeah.
Because the great things about like YouTube and these other platforms is that they're archived. So these influencers, they can see, okay, this particular video is constantly getting a few hundred hits a week, every week for the last couple of, for the last, year, 2 years, however long your title has been out. That's awesome information to have as a developer, because that tells you that there's persistent interest in this topic. How can we leverage this interest? How can we make this more interesting to players going forward? Because there's always this constant ticking interest going on. Whereas if you see like, okay, it's a one and done, video, then yeah, okay, that it's got a spike, but how do we give that the persistent interest that goes on into the future?
So this actually,
yeah.
I was going to say, this actually ties into kind of a question that I have been mulling over for a long time, which is sort of on the idea of like, okay, I found something that's valuable, should I tweak my economy? But could that break the economy? And so I guess the core of the question is, what is a broken game economy? Like, what does that mean for a game? And if that is the case, can I fix a broken economy without creating backlash and losing all my players?
I think my experience with that, I've broken a couple of economies.
Nice.
So one thing is, I think, like similar to what was mentioned before, before releasing a new stuff on the a new thing on the economy. Because of course, if the economy is not yet live, or the game is early soft launch, or an MVP stage, etc., you can do more dramatic change. You can detect and do more dramatic changes on the economy, and whatever, nobody will care, because most of the population of the game will come up later. Now the big problem is if you have the game going, there is a big population already, and you break it. That is difficult because you cannot do massive changes in many games. Most of the population of the game has already entered in the game in the past, so you cannot recover. You cannot easily come back from a massive loss of the AU. I think, or at least in my experience, if you pitch to certain members of the community, or even to the economy. To the community abroad, the features that you want to introduce, the kind of economy model that you want to generate, etc., that at least can detect you a lot of the exploits. Of course, the community as a whole will never tell you, oh, you're being too rewarding. But whales and expert players, especially if they have an established relationship of confidence with you, they'll probably tell you like, okay, this is way out of, it seems too rewarding, or this seems not enough rewarding, or I could anticipate players saying that this is super greedy, or this is super pushy for this is pay to win and stuff like that. So one key advice, at least for me, is try to pitch whatever you want to do to some small group of expert players, and they will provide you really, really good feedback. Now, the other thing is, okay, what if even if you did that, you broke the economy? I think that you have several ways to do it. To fix a problem. For me, there are some stuff that you can kind of go back. Let's say like you have a perfect or really good going gold economy, and you release this new feature, and it's super rewarding, etc. Probably you can tweak the rewards over time in order to progressively make them go down. Maybe you can mix that with other rewards going up. So in order to kind of disguise the fact that you are devaluating the feature. And then there are some other situations where the economy is so broken that sometimes you don't need to fix it. What you need is to move away from it. And I've seen, for example, in Monster Legends, it does happen. The gold economy is the inflation is insane. And instead of fixing gold in the game, because that would have pissed off a lot of people, would have broken the foundations of how they had to structure their own realms and their own, cities and everything, and the type of creatures they were farming and stuff like that. Instead of doing that, what we did is we kind of keep that as an area of the game that is not particularly monetized, and instead we moved the monetization effort to newer and healthier currencies. So basically, we made people pay for new currencies that we could keep under control, instead of trying to fix something that was basically unfixable without killing the game.
Yeah, it's important.
Actually, dropping the secret sauce recipe here. Compartmentalize things.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kaitlin.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, like the big question is broken how? Because there are countless ways to break an economy, and there are just as many ways to salvage it once you've broken it. Like you're mentioning about moving, players moving away from certain types of currencies that have become too inflated, too devalued to be useful. And one of the classic examples is in Diablo 2. They had gold. Nobody traded gold because it was worthless. Nobody cared about gold. Everyone was playing, either using runes or Stone of Jordans, because they were far more stable concepts of wealth. So a Stone of Jordan wouldn't devalue over time quite as much as gold would. So the players themselves abandoned a worthless currency and basically created their own. As I recall, I think it was EverQuest 2 used horse dung
as
Ultima Online. That was it. It was Ultima Online. Used horse dung as a currency type because it only spawned for a very short period of time, as I recall, and it was super difficult to get. It's basically had a limited supply, and it worked well as a medium of exchange. So sometimes as you're saying, sometimes the best way to solve a broken economy is to just give them one that works. Just stop trying. There's only so much you can do to try and fix an economy that's already broken itself. Sometimes the right answer is just move on. And give them a new currency type that is controlled, that is better fixed, and use that, and leave the relatively broken currency type as just as just its own thing off to the side. Like example in Warframe, they have credits, which is their soft currency. Yep. No one trades in credits because they're worthless.
They're worthless.
But they don't use credits as a strong reward type anymore. They don't make you farm credits. They've actually added in nodes that allows you to farm huge amounts of credits super quick and super easy, and they've just abandoned that as a sink. So they've just accepted, okay, players have effectively infinite credits. We will control them in other means. So they'll use things like Endo. They'll use things like, so I'm just naming off a bunch of resources that if you haven't played the game, you probably don't understand. Yeah, they have Platinum, which is a hard currency. They have, like when you upgrade your mods, you use Endo and credits. Well, since credits are effectively infinite, realistically, you're just using Endo. When you're building weapons and you're building frames, like it's the resources that go into it that are the hard to get stuff, not the credits. So credits have just become a non-issue in the game because the currency scaled out from underneath of them. So yeah, honestly, sometimes the easiest way to fix a broken economy is to just leave the broken economy and make a fixed economy to work on the side.
So everything has been said. Warframe is a fun example. They have their own inside market. I haven't touched the game scene for a long time, but it's true that people the perceived value of things is defined by the players themselves, and they just trade stuff for hard currency in a sort of black market. It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's not even a black market. It's a supporting market.
Not black market, it's just internal market of things that's just on this piece of the frame, and you can buy it for another piece, so you could for Endo or for it's pretty great. So something I think something we haven't discussed is seasonal reset. Sometimes also what if your games allow it, and that's also a good learning. That it's always good to try everything as an event first, because it can be stops and resetted if needed. But if you need to fix this, I think this is a good way to fix an economy that just introduces seasonality and just say season's over, man. So stuff is new currency, new stuff. Yeah, look at this, all the good stuff we have, and use this as an excuse to just change the value of things, because that could also be a solution. It's harder to. Yeah,
I think that's a good practice. But again, as you mentioned, it is similar to something you mentioned, which is compartmentalization of the economy, which I think it's great, and it really makes that if something broken, at least it won't contaminate anything else, and you can it's properly isolated, etc. The thing, and I feel it's the same thing with seasonality. It has to do a lot. You need to take in account a lot the audience, because, for example, if you're doing casual games, compartmentalization is something that is desirable, sure, but from the developer side, but it can make the game too complex to be easily manageable by a casual audience. I can think on, for example, homescapes and gardenscapes and so on, which features only one currency. Which again, it's kind of seems like bad practice, right? But I feel it kind of works because like a casual audience, like if they had like 7 different types of currencies, it would probably be way too hard for them to manage. It would require for the players, it would require players to start strategizing which kind of areas of the game do they play in order to gather one currency or the other. And instead, for them, it works much better to have only a single currency, and then treat every single booster as if it was a currency of sorts. So I think with seasonality, it happens the same thing. For example, I've worked in several games that were oriented to collector players. And for example, to those players, like, losing their content because of seasonality, even if it makes sense, even if that content is used for competition, it's really really punishing. I think that, for example, Magic the Gathering probably has, or at least that's what I think, the best seasonal rotation system ever. Has one cool thing, which is the fact that once the card rotates out, it still keeps their collection value, because you still keep the actual card, and you can even actually becomes more valuable as a collection item, because when it rotates out, no more of them will be factored, at least in theory. So it will raise its value and so on, become more scarce. But in a lot of games that are oriented to collection, like for players losing their collection and so on, it can be also very punishing. So I do agree, like that's the kind of thing that makes a lot of sense on paper, but it really depends on the audience to know, or I think it's very relevant to know if the audience is going to take it or not, and not every single audience is going to accept it in a similar way.
The other important thing to mention, like we're talking a lot about compartmentality, is making sure you don't end up with islands of content. Where the player goes and does X activity, which makes them better at X activity, but has no interaction with anything else in the rest of the game. I mean, we've mentioned Warframe before, which is a game that has a bit of a reputation for having these islands of content within the game. I mean, you've got their Railjack game mode where you get rewards for Railjack, which only helps you do more Railjack. I mean, if you don't find
somehow,
it's an extremely closed loop, so it doesn't. There's no encourage, like as a main game player, I don't feel any desire to go play Railjack because it doesn't help me with the game modes that I enjoy. Whereas if I could get some really awesome mods or some really cool weapons from Railjack that would help me in the rest of the game, I might be wanting to go and explore this other game mode. So making sure that you've got a sufficient amount of cross-pollination, if you will, between different game modes that draws players in, gives them rewards for something else. I actually wrote a blog piece about a month ago on my blog. It's treasuresavvy.wordpress.com, I think. And I actually covered on games that have both good, too much island of content, too little island of content, and a really nice sweet spot, which I think was Guild Wars 2. They have a gearing system which really rewards you for doing different types of content, but doesn't force you into doing different types of content that you might not otherwise enjoy. So it's a really important thing to sort of say, like, how compartmentalized do we want things to be?
I think one methodology, and it's an approach that I've taken several times on live games, to keep compartmentalization, but keep complexity at bay, and do not create this type of thing where you create this Frankenstein monster, and if you enter as a new player, you see like 1,000 features and so on. Is link it to seasonal. What I've done a lot of times is link it to seasonality. So I create this new feature, and that feature is going to exist for only a period of time, not necessarily a season. It can be like 1 year or two, but basically that island of content, that area of content makes the player go through a specific activity, etc. And once that activity has been kind of wasted out, both in terms of content and in terms of innovation for the player, like it's not new and fun anymore, we kind of integrate it into the general economy, and we create a new section. So I think this is a way how you can keep the economy kind of evolving, and essentially having sections of the economy that work like a LiveOps. And I think one big mistake is just adding more and more features and kind of complexifying the economy and making it grow without taking into account, or without necessarily revamping the previous areas of the economy, and eventually you end up with systems that are so complex that have difficulties on engaging new players, just because you enter there and there are so many things which made sense if you were living the game experience since day one, because then they were added progressively to your experience. But now entering
it's a mess.
When the game has been live 4 years from the start, it's basically insane. I see that in, for example, a lot of MMOs, and I think one of the things
Warframe is the best example ever.
One of the cool things with, for example, World of Warcraft, and they actually touched that a lot with the latest expansion. With their last expansion, was that they keep on revamping the experience for the early players and kind of streamlining it a lot. I recently played World of Warcraft Classic, and just examining like the differences between the because what I was thinking was, okay, Classic is gonna be awesome, and like the modern World of Warcraft, they're moving away those heretics. And actually, what I discovered was that the modern or the contemporary WoW, to me, it's really more fun. The game is really faster. I can have it and have a life at the same time, which is not something that I can have with a WoW Classic. And for me, WoW Classic was super cool to make me come back to World of Warcraft. But I really appreciate. I think it was very smart by Blizzard to keep on improving the experience from the point of view of the started player, and it's a strong lesson, in my opinion, for people dealing with game economies. Like if you make the economy more and more complex, that can make sense for players that have been in the game for a long time, and they are enjoying these new features, but it can make the economy less effective for players that are starting right now.
Yeah, especially if you've got a live project that has been live for a while, you need to frequently come back and just say, okay, what actually is the new player experience here?
Yep.
How are new players introduced to these various systems? Because if you're layering system on top of system on top of system on top of system, then when that new player comes in and they see a tutorial with 87 steps, they're going to go no, and they're going to churn immediately.
Especially when the tutorial ends and the tutorial of the new feature which you introduced 3 years after pumps up, and you can chain tutorials for
or even worse, you don't have a tutorial. You don't, you've got the original tutorial, and then they're thrown into this game that's got
the game is not about has nothing to do with what was at the beginning.
Or it's just like, okay, well, like you've taught me how to do 3 things, and now I'm being presented with 10 things. What do I do with the other 7? How am I supposed to learn about these things? So like going back and reevaluating your day 0 player experience, and just like, okay, how do we teach them about the systems that they actually need to know? And I mean, sometimes you might want to lock off new content to higher levels. Like, okay, you want to be able to do this new game mode? Well, get to level 5. Show us you understand the basics. Get to level 5, then we introduce this new game mode, which was an event 3 years ago. And control the pacing, because that's a big way that you can throw out so many of your day 0 players, is just by having bad pacing. Introducing features at a wrong time, introducing just confusing the player is one of the fastest way to get them to leave your game.
Just to add on everything, just to recap, never underestimate the value of using LiveOps to test economy in general. Just throw events all the time with stuff in it. Reduced version of gachas, reduced version or simplified version of something else that you want to test, and just do your MVP with events all the time. So just this event, because if it backfires at you, just toggle it off. That's it. It's gone. It was an event. It was stated this way.
Ideally, you should design your game to make those kinds of events as easy as possible to do. Like if you're working on what is it? Path of Exile, perfect example of a game that was designed from the ground up with these LiveOps systems as a concept. So their entire game loop is like, okay, a new event comes out, you start again at level 1, and you power through to experience this game mode. And then when the event is over, that character goes back to Standard League, and most players don't play Standard League. No. They just start a new character with the new event to try the new cool thing. And when Path of Exile, when Grinding Gear Games finds something that's really cool, that really resonates with players, they'll actually take that game, that event feature, and roll it into the base game. So it is now a permanent feature. So they use their events, their seasons, to basically, as you said, run a test on how the players react to this particular feature. Some of them are just super popular and the players love them to death, and other ones are just like, no, we do not like this.
Disappear forever.
And they'll just like, okay, we've learned our lesson, we're not going to do this one again, and they kill that feature and they go to the next season.
An interesting usage on that direction. of LiveOps in relationship with the game economies, for example, on Adventure Communist or Idle Miner
Idle
Tycoon.
games.
I think those games in general, all this type of idle tycoons, the points where the games are more fun is at the beginning, where you're establishing the loop, etc. But then once you are 1 year into the game is really repetitive and really doesn't add that much, the game economy itself, because everything is so big, and now it's about trillions instead of billions, but essentially you're not doing anything new. And how a very smart way how the events really reset the economy in a way is that on the events you basically are replaying the game from the beginning, but is just gonna last for 1 week, for example, or 2 days or whatever.
Yeah.
But this makes you relive the moments that were the most fun in the game. And in Adventure Communist in particular, it's really awesome. It kind of feels it's just a reset of the game that you play for 2 days. And what happens is that since the most fun moments happen just at the beginning of the game, that's when you see everything explode, you unlock the different materials and stuff like that. That kind of keeps the game always fresh. And I felt that was a super smart way to use LiveOps to kind of affect the economy, or at least to keep the economy soft resetting on an area on its best area. Because, for example, completely resetting the progression, they do it, but in some points, but I felt like for that type of player would be really punishing, no? Like making them work to create their own mine, etc., and then like you lose it. It's a little bit punishing, but with the events, it's a much softer and much more acceptable way.
That's why there's no reset without leaving the players with something. They should always have something to show for it. You know, a trophy, skins and weapons, charms and stuff, that you have stuff because you were there. You know, you were there, and this is extremely important. So it's a tool to reset the economy, but never forget about leaving the players with something. If not, it's
I think that's something that can be really learned from roguelike games, because those are very much games that's like, okay, you come in, you play for a bit, you die, but every time you play, you get, you start a little bit further ahead than you did last time. So it's like, okay, I made the level 13 in the dungeon, but I unlocked 5% more HP. So now maybe I'll make it to level 14. Or maybe I'll get really unlucky and I'll only make it to level 5 because the randomness just screwed me over. But understanding that it's like every time I do it, I always get a little bit further, and that can definitely apply to seasonality as well. Like, okay, it's the Christmas event. Well, maybe this Christmas, it's I've got some stuff going on. I'm visiting a whole bunch of family. I don't have time to play. I might only be able to get halfway to the Santa Claus hero. But in the next year, when that Christmas event rolls around again, maybe that halfway to Santa Claus hero can get me something to start off with the next event. Like, oh, I start off a quarter of the way to the Santa Claus hero, so I don't have as far to go. I didn't quite get reset to 0, or the price of the Santa Claus hero has been reduced. So now instead of it needing 100 Santa hats, I only need 66 Santa hats. So now I'm really closer to getting that Santa hero, but now there's a reindeer hero at 100 Santa hats, and now I've got another goal to go to. One of the important things with monetization, one of the great things with being a digital existence, is that we don't have overhead costs. Like once you've made the code and the artwork for a hero, it costs you just as much to make one of that hero as it costs you to make 100 million of that hero. So there's no actual production duplication costs once the thing has been produced. So we can really monetize the entire price demand curve. So you can start off with a premium item being, if it's in for example, a gacha pack, it might be worth, 100 USD, 100 US dollars for a player to, on average, to earn this item through the random gacha. Well, then you can put it into a better gacha later on, and maybe now it's only 50 USD. And then you can sell it in the shop directly for $20. Then you can have an event where the player needs to spend like $10 for it, and then you can put it in the shop again for $5, and you can keep hitting every point down that curve. And as long as there's a sufficient amount of time in between them, so that the players who got it at $100 feel like, okay, I got an extra year of use out of this item, that the person who's paying $10 for it now, they're just starting. Mine's already max level. I've been using it for a while. I've gotten my value out of it. So if you put enough time in between, you can monetize that entire price demand curve and get far more out of an item than if you just said, okay, it's going in at $100 and that's it, we're done. You want to be able to hit those players. It's like, okay, I want this hero, but I'm not spending $100 for it. I'm willing to spend $20 for it. Well, if the price continuously comes down, eventually it'll get to the point where that $20 player is like, okay, now it's worth my time. So you can monetize them then later on. So being able to change the price of things, again, usually through live events, through some sort of special offer, can allow you to monetize the entire price demand curve and really optimize the amount of money you can get out of the same amount of work producing that hero, that asset in the first place.
So,
sorry.
Well, I was actually going to say that kind of reminds me of one last topic that I did want to cover today, which is specifically in social casino games. As you unlock, let's say, like new casinos or lotto boxes or whatnot, usually the cost to play each of those kind of goes up. And what is the approach that you guys think should be taken towards scaling the currency that you can buy in the shop to kind of keep up on entry fees and things like that? So, kind of, Kaitlin, as you were talking about how you have a sliding scale down from like 100 down to maybe like $1 for that sword, is there a way to appropriately do that such that as players progress and things are more expensive in the game, the, price of currency kind of keeps on par with that, or, at least keeps up with that, if you kind of follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. One of the titles I'm working on right now, we have the resources. When you first start off, it's like, okay, I might need like a couple thousand. But when you've been playing the game for 6 months, 8 months, you might need 20 million. So obviously, if we sold a new player 20 million resources, it would break their experience. But conversely, if we tried to sell a end game player stuff in 5,000 unit denominations, they'd be clicking buy for like 45 minutes just to be able to afford anything. So you need to be able to scale these things up. And one of the things that we're using is having the player unlock better bundles as they progress through the game. So if you want the $5 bundle for 2 million resources, you can get that at level 5. But then when you get to level 8, okay, now you've unlocked the 10 million bundle for $7. So it's twice as much stuff, but a little bit more expensive. So it's, you can still buy the older bundle, but really you're going to want to buy the one that's got twice as much stuff that's a little bit more expensive. So the players will see a progression in the bundles, and it's something that they've earned. It's not something that they've bought. Like you have to earn the right to be able to get this bundle. And it's important to put in that feeling of accomplishment for the player that this is something that they've deserved. This is something that they've worked for. and give them that ability to get the bigger bundles, which have appropriate amount of resources for the content that they're doing at that point of the game progression.
So just to jump, so I kept thinking coinmaster in my mind, because coinmaster just accumulates soft currency like crazy. You're just spending millions and millions and millions, and the shop. I think the most important thing to keep in mind in this case is maybe you don't need to monetize the soft currency. Maybe you just need to increase the link with the hard currency, or with the energy in this case in CoinMaster, So you need this stable hard currency to be able just to make the link between with your inflating soft currency. So that would be one solution, I think. So to board game, CoinMaster, all of those games that increase, maybe idle games. I'm not sure, Javier, you might just add on this. You might be an expert on idle games, but I think the shop scales, right?
I don't know. I would
I'm not
have
sure.
to check it out.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that I'm not entirely sure that the main monetization area on, for example, in Adventure Communist, I don't think they sell you.
No.
They sell you the currencies themselves. I think that what they sell you is actually the amount of time, so the main soft currency is workers in Adventure Communist.
Yeah.
And they don't sell you 1 million workers. What they sell you is the amount of workers that you would get in 4 hours. So they sell you 4 hours of workers.
That's cool.
That
I
way,
really like that.
That way, they always match the progression on acquisition of workers that you have achieved.
That's
a very cool trick.
On the topic of inflation of prices, I would like to enter once you are done.
Yeah, I mean, I was done. I mean, the other thing I wanted to add was, like, you can also, if the inflation is linked to higher spending, you can tie this into a VIP model so that your VIP gets access to the black store, the red store, the whatever you want store, and that also could be a solution. So if you just have, if it's not inherently linked to just the game progression that inflates, but it's because people just want to spend more on just more energy, more stuff, you can link it to the VIP model, and just that's it. The VIPs get more stuff in the shop because they unlocked it. Go on, Javier.
Yeah, on this topic, just because the specific example that Tom mentioned seemed to point out an escalation of the real pricings, on the real price of things. So at the beginning, I'm paying €1, then I'm paying €5, then I'm paying €10. I don't think that's a very good practice. Of course, every genre it's its own thing, and of course, as the players are more engaged or are more advanced in the game, they'll probably be more engaged, and then you can release to them higher prices, and probably because they are more engaged at the end of the game, they're probably higher ranges of prices are going to be more valuable for the monetization. But what happens, like if you have a dolphin that can only spend $10 per month, and then once you are 3 months in the game, what you are asking is not $10, or spending $10 basically provides you nothing, and in order to keep on being competitive or keep on progressing at the same pace, instead what you have to pay is $50. Then you're basically killing your population. You're setting up a natural selection, and only the bigger payers survive. And eventually, if that keeps up, there's going to be one point where not even $99 is going to be enough. And so when it comes to pricing, what I would advise is try to keep the range of prices kind of relatively stable through the course of the game, and make that even in the late game, a purchase of $10 can still make sense because you're following another strategy or something, in order not to kill or to move away those players. Because even if, of course, you want to target a whale and obtain a whale for your audience, obtaining a dolphin is extremely valuable, and it shouldn't be sacrificed. Now, on the topic of the soft currency, my advice would be, I'm concerned. I'm always concerned with inflation, just because I've seen games. I've created a lot of games with inflation of the some currency, and sometimes trying to keep that valuable at different ranges of the game. It's super difficult. On Asphalt 8, I added the same or something very similar to what Kaitlin was mentioning. So basically what happened is when you progressed on the career, you would unlock bundles of soft currency that would multiply the amount of currency that you were getting on those packs. And the behavior was not as expected, because what I expected is that, okay, at the beginning they would pay because, I don't know, $20 was equivalent to 1,000 credits, and that would allow you to buy the cars. But then at the end game, $10 would give you 200,000, and that would allow you to buy the cars at that stage. But what happened was that players were advising to each other not to spend until they had progressed, because what they were feeling is like, oh, if you pay at the beginning of the game, you're wasting your money, because if you wait, you will get much more value for the same amount of money. So
you've got to be
and on
real
top of
careful
that,
with
it was harder to manage when it comes to, for example, doing discounts and stuff like that. I had to take that in account, the fact that, okay, there were several prices and several different packs inside the game and so on. So I felt it was a suboptimal solution for me, even if for sure in short games do make sense. Like, for example, in Clash Royale, the fact that you increase the output of the chests when you progress, I think that's great, in order to keep packs competitive, or chests competitive, sorry. But in general, what I would say is like, maybe I do prefer to keep inflation under control, and if it cannot be kept under control, because of course we want to provide bigger rewards in order to fuel a sense of progression and so on, maybe sell stuff that is not necessarily the currency itself, but rather something that doesn't change over time. For example, in Clash of Clans, instead of selling gold, sell a refill of the gold container and stuff like that, which will allow you to keep a price that is stable over the course of the game, even if that price is still valuable, keeping up with the progression and the escalation of the rewards. The example on Adventure Communists for me works really great as well. It would be super hard for them to manage how many workers would be appropriate for a certain amount of money, because that increases really a lot through the progression of the game. And of course, if the player would have the impression that, okay, if I wait, I'm gonna get more workers for the amount of my money, I would wait. And the fact that they are selling hours instead for a single price makes it that, okay, no matter when you buy it, it's always going to provide you a similar value. So for me, again, trying to move the gate to the areas that do not suffer inflation, even if the ultimate thing that you're selling is an element that suffers a big inflation, would be the way to go. Of course, it depends a lot on the genre, and it's hardly, extrapolable to every single genre out there.
This trick is so cool.
The other nice thing about tying it to time as well is that it allows you as a designer to compare your valuation versus other titles within the similar genre. So like if it costs $500 and 6 months of game time to reach max level in your title, and it costs $20,000 and 6 months of game time to reach max level in a competitor's title, they're probably monetizing in ways that you're not. So, it allows you to look at, because, what's 100 units of food in game A compared to 100 units in wood in game B? You can't compare them. It's apples and oranges. But 1 hour of gathering time in game A is pretty comparable to 1 hour of gathering time in game B, because you've got that commonality of 1 hour of real world. So looking at your monetization from a how much, what is the dollars per hour that I'm saving, or what's the dollar per hour cost of this content in my game versus the dollar per hour cost of this content in my competitor's game. And, are we within, are we similar? Are we completely, are we in order of magnitude more expensive? Because that may make players feel that, our game is too expensive. Where are they doing the monetization in the other titles? Are they doing it, gathering the resources to be able to press the button, or are they monetizing mostly on the, skipping the button after you've already pressed it? How are they monetizing in their time? So it's a good universal comparison by tying it to time. So yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. That's a very interesting thing. The only problem that I would say is that the distribution of resources per hour, unless the fluctuation is really big, and again, it's a super cool thing as a developer to check out. But unless the distribution is really the difference is really big, it will probably not generate a even spottable difference for the players. And honestly, I've never seen a player saying, on this game, I get 20% more per hour. Probably, I've seen them say, "Oh, this game is way more expensive or way less rewarding."
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I wanted to point out an example that I think it kind of links with which is related to that, which is linked to the implications of the game economy design, which is, for example, Asphalt 8 and Real Racing compared to CSR and Rival Racing, which is in both are car games, and of course in car games the most fun stuff is to get new cars. The fun thing is when you get your Porsche or your Ferrari and so on. And in Real Racing 3 and Asphalt 8 and Asphalt 9, getting a Ferrari is pretty expensive. And it's really premium. It requires a lot of work, but in comparison, getting it on CSR and in Racing Rivals, especially, it's way cheaper. But it's like a very significant. It's in Racing Rivals, I remember it was like 1/3 of the price of like any given car. It was 1/3 of the price of the same car in Real Racing 3 and Asphalt 8 and Asphalt 9. And the main reason was because on CSR, the depth of upgrade spending in the cars was so big. There were so many upgrades and so many like you had to. Like getting the car was just the start of the journey in CSR, and then you have to put up so much money that it really was worth for them to give it cheaper. And on Racing Rivals, it was awesome because even taking into account that yes, they had significant upgrade spending and so on. In Racing Rivals, you could lose the cars by betting them, and because of that, they made the most premium element of the genre a consumable. And because of that, I mean,
That's cool.
Sure, when you lose
awesome.
the game, unless it was a collector's car, which you shouldn't bet, you could pay a certain amount, which was lower than the acquisition price, in order to get it back. But whatever the case, that meant they held your car hostage. But whatever the case, this means that they could give the cars more freely and in a more cheaper way, and therefore be perceived as way cheaper, because that premium element that was a super permanent element had incorporated a lot of consumable elements, which made that it generated revenue because people were going to bet it and lose it sometimes and pay to keep it or to get it back.
That's clever.
That's
That is
super.
super
So
clever.
I felt that was
That's a
super
cool
super
trick.
smart when it came to how you can generate a game economy and affect stuff related to prices, etc. And how can that have implications on the value that players perceive on the game?
That is brilliant. I'm going to remember
That's
that
brilliant,
trick.
Yeah.
I
If you take
remember that
nothing
going
away,
forward.
take this away today.
I'm so sad that I haven't tried this on Hungry Dragon. That would have been
Yeah.
perfect. Have you played Hungry Dragon?
No, I haven't. But yeah, there's a few titles that I've worked on in the past where I'm just like, oh man, that would have been so great in this game. But yeah, I'm certain something like that allowing players to wager content that they've won.
Yeah,
can
honestly,
really...
in some games, because I've tried to do that in several games, and in some games, people does not accept it that well. And probably if you're working in a casual game oriented to kids, you should not do it.
No.
You should not integrate gambling. But even in other games that I've done for more adult audiences, it really depends. I think that in cars, it's a genius idea because this thing about betting your car is something that appears on Fast and the Furious movies, and it's part of the kind of the lingo of the inner world of actual car racers. So it's really close to the thematic. Same thing with we were talking about seasonalities, and one major game that has seasonalities in free to play is Madden, and also they are also they're kind of introducing this type of seasonality where you need to build your team again in every single sports game. In top 11, for example, your players get older, and they lose value, and you need to constantly be hiring new players and so on. And I feel that's genius because it fits so well with the thematic of the game that it kind of feels natural. It feels natural in a football manager that your players get old, because that's what happens on reality. And the same thing with seasonality of in Madden, for example, new season. Okay, now the different teams have to wage on the different players and so on. And that thematic suitability, for me, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of like a different take on power creep, basically.
It is.
So instead of introducing new units, new cards, new whatever your thing is, you slowly over time sort of reduce the power of the existing ones.
In top 11 is genius. Probably with it should have its own podcast. And Tom, you should definitively call somebody from Nordeus, because the design of top 11 is genius on how they manage stat nerfing, and every time you go from one league to another, the units of the newer league are higher stats than the older one, and that generates an internal economy of players that sell your the players that were really good and allow you to move from one league to another. Then you sell them cheap to the players that are on the lower league, so they give you resources so you can buy the players of your current league. It's genius. Top 11 is genius.
Smart. I might have to pick that up.
Love it. Cool. Well, guys, I think we're about at our time here. This has been fantastic. I feel like I've
awesome.
learned a lot. I had a lot of fun just chatting about game economies and thinking about things. I took a lot of great notes and just absorbed information. So I do want to thank all of you for joining me tonight.
I had a wonderful time. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone that was listening got some great insights. I'll post links to both of your blogs. Hadrian, I don't know if you have a blog.
No, just go LinkedIn. I should, right? I know. When I find the time, I will.
All right, we're gonna post a LinkedIn message, and if we can get it preformed so that you can ask him to write a blog, maybe we'll get him to do that. So, thank you again, guys.